Elise, sensing Julian's fascination with the toy, allowed a playful smile to grace her lips. She moved toward the bed, her movements deliberate and fluid, a silent overture that beckoned Julian to join her. "Would you like to see how it works?" she asked. Julian nodded, his throat tight with desire. "Yes, I would." "Hey there. Make sure you score my video in the comments. I need your opinion." Now let's dive into this story. Elise lay beside the pool, the embodiment of serenity, her long, toned legs stretched out before her. The sun worshipped her form, casting a golden glow over her sun-kissed skin and highlighting the soft curves of her body. Her swimsuit, a deep blue that mirrored the sky above, clung to her, accentuating the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. Her eyes were hidden behind oversized sunglasses, and her lips, tinted with a hint of coral gloss, were parted slightly in a state of perfect relaxation. The world around her hummed with the typical sounds of suburbia, the distant laughter of children, the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog, the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a symphony of normalcy that Elise found both comforting and stifling in its predictability. She had come to her friend's house seeking a respite from the relentless pace of her urban existence, a place where she could shed the armor of her professional persona and simply be. Unbeknownst to Elise, her tranquil afternoon was about to be disrupted in the most unexpected of ways. Julian, her friend's stepson, had returned home from college earlier than anticipated, his arrival unannounced and his presence unnoticed until now. He stood at the patio door, his tall frame casting a long shadow that cut across the sunlit deck. His eyes, locked onto Elise, darkened with an unspoken yearning that sent a jolt of awareness through her, disrupting the tranquility of her solitude. Julian had always been a peripheral figure in Elise's life, a constant yet largely invisible presence on the fringes of her interactions with his mother. But the boy, who had once seemed so unremarkable, had transformed in the years he had been away. The soft contours of adolescence had given way to the chiseled angles of a man, his body toned from hours spent on the university's rowing team. His t-shirt clung to his chest, outlining the definition of his muscles, and his cargo shorts hung casually from his hips, hinting at the strength of his legs. As Elise's awareness of Julian grew, so too did the uncomfortable realization that she was being watched. She could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical touch, tracing the lines of her body and stirring a warmth within her that had nothing to do with the sun's caress. Her heart began to beat a little faster, a subtle shift in her body's rhythm that mirrored the turmoil beginning to simmer beneath the surface of her calm. Julian's presence was a disruption in the carefully curated scene of her afternoon retreat. The air seemed to thicken around them, charged with an electric current that hummed with the promise of the forbidden. Elise knew she should feel violated, should pull the towel tightly around her and demand an explanation for his intrusion. But there was a part of her, a traitorous part, that reveled in the attention, that thrilled at the idea of being the object of such intense fascination. For a long, suspended moment, neither of them moved. It was as if they were both caught in the grip of an unspoken agreement, a mutual acknowledgement of the attraction that sizzled in the space between them. Then, with a deliberate slowness that seemed to stretch time, Julian lifted his hand in a silent greeting, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. Elise returned the gesture, her own smile betraying none of the inner turmoil that his appearance had wrought. She was a master of composure, a woman who had navigated the treacherous waters of corporate politics with grace and intelligence. Surely she could handle the unwanted advances of a college kid, even if that kid was Julian. But as she watched him step onto the deck, his movements fluid and confident, Elise was forced to confront the unsettling truth. Julian was no longer the boy she remembered. He had grown into a man who was both familiar and entirely unknown to her, a man whose very presence seemed to challenge the foundations of her carefully constructed world. As he approached, the scent of his cologne mingled with the chlorine-tinged air, a heady combination that seemed to encapsulate the danger and allure of the situation. Elise could feel the pull of his gravity, a force that threatened to draw her into an orbit she was not prepared to enter. "Mind if I join you?" Julian's voice was deeper than she remembered, a low timbre that seemed to resonate within her chest. Elise lifted her sunglasses, propping them atop her head as she met his gaze. Her eyes, a vibrant shade of green, held a hint of caution, a silent warning that he was treading on perilous ground. "It's a free country," she replied, her tone light, almost dismissive. Julian's smile widened, and he lowered himself onto the lounger beside hers, his movements careful and measured. "It's been a while, Elise," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You look incredible." The compliment, delivered with such sincerity, caught Elise off guard. She felt a flush creeping up her cheeks, a blush that she hoped could be attributed to the sun's warmth rather than the effect of his words. "Thank you, Julian," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've grown up." He chuckled, a rich, throaty sound that seemed to fill the space around them. "Yeah, well, college does that to you, I guess." They lapsed into silence, the ease of their conversation belied by the undercurrents of tension that thrummed between them. Elise could feel the intensity of Julian's gaze, a palpable heat that seemed to sear her skin wherever it landed. She knew she should get up, should put an end to this dangerous game before it spiraled out of control. But her body refused to obey the dictates of her mind, rooted to the spot by a fascination she could neither explain nor deny. As the minutes ticked by, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Here she was, a successful, independent woman, allowing herself to be drawn into a web of attraction with her friend's stepson, a man young enough to be her... what? Little brother? The thought was both absurd and undeniably thrilling. Julian shifted in his seat, the movement drawing Elise's attention to the muscles that rippled beneath his clothing. "I've missed this place," he said, his voice tinged with a wistful longing. "It's always been my sanctuary, you know? A place to escape the chaos of the outside world." Elise nodded, understanding all too well the sentiment he was expressing. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "Sometimes you just need a place where you can let your guard down and simply exist." Later that night, the dinner party was in full swing, the spacious dining room alive with the sound of clinking crystal and the soft hum of conversation. Elise moved through the room with an easy elegance, her black dress a sleek silhouette against the backdrop of the tastefully decorated space. The fabric clung to her curves in all the right places, the hem skimming her knees in a demure yet undeniably enticing manner. Her hair was pulled back into a chignon, a few artfully arranged tendrils framing her face, and her makeup was flawless, emphasizing her striking features without overwhelming them. Julian watched her from across the room, his eyes tracking her every move. He was struck by the transformation he witnessed. The casual poolside Elise had been replaced by this poised, sophisticated woman who commanded attention without even trying. There was a magnetism about her, a self-assuredness that was both intimidating and irresistible. As the guests took their seats for dinner, Julian found himself positioned directly across from Elise, a fortunate turn of events that he had subtly orchestrated. The long mahogany table was set with fine china and gleaming silverware, candlelight casting a warm glow over the assembled company. Julian's mother, always the consummate hostess, presided over the gathering with a smile, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that simmered beneath the surface of her son's interactions with Elise. Conversation flowed as easily as the wine, and Elise found herself laughing at a colleague's anecdote, her laughter a melodic sound that seemed to draw Julian in even further. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded into the background. There was a question in his gaze, one that Elise could not yet bring herself to answer. Instead, she offered him a small, enigmatic smile, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that pulsed between them. Throughout the meal, Julian found ways to subtly draw Elise's attention back to him, a shared joke, a request for her opinion on a particular topic of conversation. Each interaction was an opportunity to engage with her, to reinforce the bond that had been forged by their earlier encounter. And then, as the evening wore on, he made his move. Beneath the cover of the table, Julian allowed his leg to brush against Elise's. The contact was brief, a mere whisper of skin against skin, but it was enough to send a jolt of electricity coursing through them both. Elise's eyes widened slightly, the only outward sign of her surprise, and Julian couldn't help but feel a thrill of satisfaction at her reaction. The touch was a deliberate act, a silent declaration of his intentions. It was a promise of more to come, a tantalizing hint of the passion that simmered just beneath the surface of their civility. Elise felt the heat of his leg against hers, a brand that seemed to burn through the layers of fabric that separated them. Her heart began to race, her breath catching in her throat as she struggled to maintain her composure. For several long moments, neither of them moved. The world around them continued on, oblivious to the silent exchange that was taking place beneath the table. Guests laughed and chatted, glasses were raised in toast, and all the while Elise and Julian sat there, locked in a moment of shared desire that neither could deny. When Elise finally shifted in her seat, subtly adjusting her position to break the contact between them, Julian could see the flush that crept up her neck, the telltale sign of her arousal. He knew then that he had affected her as much as she had affected him, and the knowledge was both intoxicating and terrifying. As the dinner party drew to a close, Julian found himself reluctant to let the evening end. He wanted to prolong this delicate dance, to explore the attraction that threatened to consume them both, but he also knew that he was playing a dangerous game, one that could have far-reaching consequences for both himself and Elise. Elise, for her part, was acutely aware of the line that had been crossed. The subtle brush of Julian's leg against hers had been a clear indication of his interest, a physical manifestation of the tension that had been building between them. She knew that she should be horrified, should be rushing to put as much distance between herself and Julian as possible. But there was a part of her, a wild, reckless part, that yearned to explore this attraction, to see where it might lead. The evening had taken on a life of its own, a sequence of events that seemed to be leading Elise and Julian inexorably toward a precipice, the outcome of which remained shrouded in uncertainty. As the guests departed and the house quieted down, Julian seized the opportunity to draw Elise away from the lingering crowd, guiding her with a gentle hand on the small of her back toward the sanctuary of the wine cellar. The cellar was a testament to his family's wealth and taste, a temperature-controlled oasis where rare vintages slumbered behind rows of polished mahogany racks. The air was cool and still, the only sound the soft pad of their footsteps against the stone floor. Julian led Elise to a secluded corner, away from the faint glow of the overhead lights, where shadows clung to the edges of the room and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. "Tell me." Julian's voice was a low murmur, the words barely more than a breath as they hovered in the air between them. "What do you find irresistible in a man?" Julian's question, posed with a mixture of boldness and vulnerability, hung in the air, demanding an answer that Elise felt compelled to give. "Intelligence," she began, her voice echoing softly off the stone walls. "The ability to engage in witty repartee, to challenge and be challenged in return, and boldness," she continued, her gaze locked with Julian's. "The courage to take risks, to reach for what one desires, despite the potential consequences." Julian's eyes lit up with admiration and intrigue as he listened to Elise articulate her desires with such clarity and confidence. He was drawn to her depth, to the passion that lay just beneath the surface of her composed exterior. Elise, feeling emboldened by Julian's rapt attention, ventured further into the realm of her intimate yearnings. "As for intimacy," she said, her voice dropping to a husky whisper that seemed to resonate with the very foundation of the cellar. "It's about connection, a meeting of minds and souls that elevates the physical act to something transcendent. It's the difference between a mere touch and a touch that sets your spirit alight, between a kiss and a kiss that feels like coming home." Her words, imbued with a longing that was both raw and refined, filled the space between them, weaving a tapestry of desire that was as intoxicating as it was forbidden. Julian's breath hitched in his throat, his body responding to the imagery her words conjured, the anticipation of what she described both thrilling and daunting. Elise, caught up in the moment, allowed herself to reveal one last secret, her voice barely more than a whisper as she leaned closer to Julian. "And I love a man who is well endowed," she confessed, the audacity of her admission sending a rush of heat to her cheeks. The frankness of her words caught Julian off guard, and he felt a flush creep up his own neck as he processed her confession. He coughed lightly, a mixture of surprise and amusement coloring his response. "Well," he said, his voice quiet yet filled with a quiet confidence. "I don't have any trouble in that department." The admission, coupled with the hint of a smile that played upon his lips, coaxed a soft laugh from Elise, the tension of the moment broken by their shared candor. Yet beneath the playful banter, there was a palpable sense of excitement, a mutual acknowledgement of the physical compatibility that they both recognized as a vital component of their burgeoning attraction. Their eyes locked in the dim light of the wine cellar, and they found themselves lost in the possibilities that lay before them. The intimacy of their confessions had forged a new level of trust between them, a foundation upon which they could explore the depths of their desires without fear or reservation. As they stood there, the silence of the cellar wrapped around them like a cloak, each lost in thoughts of what the future might hold. They both understood that they were on the cusp of something profound. The connection between them was undeniable, a force that threatened to sweep away all barriers to their mutual satisfaction. With a shared look of understanding, Julian and Elise stepped away from each other, the space between them filled with the electric charge of their unspoken desires. They knew that the night was not yet theirs to claim, that there were still obstacles to overcome and consequences to consider. But as they made their way back to the world above, the memory of their candid exchange lingered in their minds, a tantalizing promise of the pleasures that awaited them if they dared to explore the depths of their connection. The house, once bustling with the energy of the dinner party, had settled into a stillness that seemed to magnify the simmering tension between Elise and Julian. With Julian's mother away on business, the sprawling suburban home felt like an island unto itself, a secluded sanctuary where the rules of the outside world did not apply. Elise moved through the quiet halls with a sense of purpose, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of Julian. She had convinced herself that a casual conversation about dinner plans would provide the perfect opportunity to dispel the charged atmosphere that had enveloped them in the wine cellar. Yet as she approached Julian's room, she couldn't deny the fluttering in her chest, a clear indication that her feelings were anything but casual. She rapped lightly on the door, pushing it open when she heard Julian's muffled invitation to enter. The scene that greeted her was both startling and strangely arousing. Julian sat at his desk, his body partially obscured by the open laptop. Elise's breath caught in her throat as she realized that the images displayed on the screen were photographs of herself, candid snapshots captured over the years during various gatherings and events. Her gaze shifted from the screen to Julian, and it was then that she noticed the subtle motion of his hand beneath the blanket that lay across his lap. The realization of what he was doing sent a jolt of heat coursing through her body, a visceral reaction that she could neither control nor conceal. Julian. His face flushed with embarrassment at being caught in such a compromising position, quickly withdrew his hand and closed the laptop with a snap. Elise, It's okay, she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. The air between them was thick with an awkward mix of guilt, desire, and the unspoken acknowledgement of their mutual attraction. I shouldn't have walked in without knocking. Their eyes locked, the silence in the room broken only by the soft hum of the computer and the sound of their combined breathing. It was a moment of raw honesty, a turning point from which there could be no turning back. Clearing his throat, Julian made an attempt at normalcy. Dinner plans? He asked, his voice strained but steady. Elise nodded, grateful for the shift in conversation. Yes, I was thinking of making a pasta dish. Do you have any preferences? Julian shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. No preferences, he said quietly. I'm sure whatever you make will be great. Their conversation was stilted, the subtext of their attraction coloring every word, every glance. Elise, feeling the intensity of Julian's gaze upon her, made a hasty retreat, promising to call him when dinner was ready. As she closed the door behind her, Elise leaned against the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. The image of Julian, his hand moving beneath the blanket as he gazed at her photos, was seared into her mind, a visual echo that fueled the fire of her desire. That night, in the solitude of her room, Elise allowed herself to explore the fantasy of Julian without restraint. The vibrant rhythm of her toy pulsed against her, a poor substitute for the touch she truly craved, yet sufficient to send waves of pleasure coursing through her body. As she reached the peak of her climax, it was Julian's face she saw, Julian's name that escaped her lips in a breathless whisper. The knowledge that they were alone in the house, separated only by walls and the fragile veneer of propriety, added an extra layer of intensity to her solo exploration. She knew that the line between fantasy and reality was becoming increasingly blurred, and that the next time they found themselves alone together, the outcome was all but inevitable. The following day, the relentless summer sun beat down upon the house, its rays penetrating the walls and turning the interior into a stifling oven. The AC unit, overwhelmed by the heat, gave a final wheezing gasp before falling silent, its mechanical failure rendering it useless against the oppressive warmth. Elise, feeling the heat's unforgiving grip, sought refuge in the idea of a cool shower, but the thought of Julian laboring over the broken air conditioner stirred a sense of camaraderie within her. She found him in the laundry room, tools scattered around him as he attempted to diagnose the problem with the defunct appliance. "Any luck?" she inquired, leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed over her chest. Julian looked up, his forehead beaded with sweat, his t-shirt clinging to his torso. "Nothing yet," he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I think we might need to call a professional." Elise nodded, her gaze lingering on the sheen of perspiration that glistened on his skin. The heat seemed to amplify everything, the scent of his exertion, the intensity of his focus, the potent reminder of their shared attraction. Together, they toiled over the broken machine, their efforts a futile dance against the backdrop of the sweltering room. Frustration mounting, Elise finally declared a ceasefire in their battle against the heat. "Screw it," she said, her tone carrying a hint of reckless abandon. "Let's just try to stay cool until we can get someone out here." As the reality of their situation sunk in, they both began to peel off layers of clothing in a desperate attempt to find relief from the heat. Julian averted his gaze as Elise removed her sundress, revealing the delicate lingerie beneath. She stood before him, the flush of heat coloring her cheeks, her body a canvas of desire that he found himself unable to ignore. Emboldened by the intimacy of the moment, Elise cast a playful glance in Julian's direction. "You know," she said, her voice a sultry whisper that seemed to fill the room, "there are more enjoyable ways to generate some heat of our own." The innuendo hung into the air between them, a challenge that Julian could not ignore. His eyes darkened with desire as he allowed himself the luxury of openly admiring the woman before him. The sight of Elise in her undergarments was intoxicating, and the evidence of his arousal was immediate and unmistakable. With a boldness that took them both by surprise, Elise closed the distance between them. Her hand reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the contours of his chest before coming to rest over the hardness that strained against his shorts. The contact was electric, a spark that threatened to ignite the fire they had been trying so desperately to suppress. Julian's breath caught in his throat as Elise's touch branded him, marking the beginning of their inevitable surrender to the desires that had been simmering just beneath the surface. Her eyes locked onto his, a silent invitation that promised pleasure, passion, and the sweet release of giving in to the forbidden. In that moment, the heat of the room was forgotten, replaced by the fiery connection that pulsed between them. It was a connection that transcended the physical, a meeting of souls that acknowledged the depth of their need for one another. With a groan that seemed to rise from the very depths of his being, Julian reached for Elise, his hands spanning her waist as he pulled her closer. Their bodies aligned, the heat of their skin a testament to the desire that coursed through their veins. Their lips met in a kiss that was both a capitulation and a revelation, a fusion of hunger and longing that left them both breathless. It was a kiss that spoke of all the things they had left unspoken, a prelude to the passionate encounter that was destined to follow. As they broke apart, gasping for air, the reality of their situation began to crystallize. They were standing on the precipice of a decision that could irrevocably alter the course of their lives. Yet as they gazed into each other's eyes, they both understood that there was no turning back, that the fire that burned within them was too potent, too compelling to be denied. The decision to move outside had been a mutual one, a shared yearning for a reprieve from the oppressive heat of the house. The pool, with its shimmering surface and cool, inviting depths, promised a respite from the warmth that clung to their skin like a second layer. They settled themselves at the pool's edge, the cool tiles beneath them a stark contrast to the heat that radiated from the sun-drenched patio. Elise turned to Julian, her green eyes alight with a mixture of anticipation and caution. "Do you mind?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability as she held up the bottle of sun cream. "I'd hate to get burned." Julian's gaze lingered on her face before dropping to the bottle in her hand. "Of course not," he replied, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate with the quiet stillness of the afternoon. "Let me help you with that." Elise handed him the bottle, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact, though brief, was enough to send a jolt of electricity coursing through them both, a tangible reminder of the magnetic pull that existed between them. Julian squeezed a generous amount of sun cream into his palm, the lotion warm and soothing against his skin. He rubbed his hands together, ensuring an even distribution of the protective balm before reaching out to touch Elise's sun-kissed shoulders. The moment his hands made contact with her skin, a shiver of delight ran through her, an involuntary reaction to the warmth and gentleness of his touch. Julian's hands moved with deliberate slowness, his fingers gliding over her skin with a reverence that spoke volumes of his growing need. He worked the lotion into her shoulders, his movements both practiced and exploratory, as if he were committing the topography of her body to memory. His hands trailed down the length of her arms, his thumbs making small circles at the crooks of her elbows, eliciting a soft sigh from Elise. Julian's gaze followed the path of his hands, watching as the sun cream was absorbed into her skin, leaving behind a subtle sheen that only served to accentuate her natural beauty. He continued his ministrations, his hands sliding across her back and along the length of her legs, each touch a silent vow of the pleasure he intended to give her. Elise, lost in the sensation of Julian's hands upon her, closed her eyes and allowed herself to succumb to the luxury of his touch. The world around them seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them, bound together by the invisible threads of their mutual desire. As Julian's hands retraced their path, making their way back up to her shoulders, Elise opened her eyes to find him watching her, his gaze filled with an intensity that took her breath away. The air between them was charged with a potent mix of longing and restraint, a testament to the delicate balance they were navigating. With a boldness that matched Julian's own, Elise reached out and placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath her palm. The contact was electric, a spark that ignited the simmering attraction that had been building between them since the moment they first laid eyes on each other by the poolside yesterday. Julian covered her hand with his own, pressing it firmly against his heart as he leaned in, his intentions clear. Elise met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was both a culmination and a beginning, the merging of two souls who had been irrevocably drawn together by the hands of fate. Their kiss was a slow exploration, a tender melding of lips and breath and longing. It was a kiss that spoke of unspoken promises and the sweet agony of anticipation, a prelude to the crescendo of passion that awaited them. As they parted, their breaths coming in short, sharp bursts, Elise stood and extended her hand to Julian, an invitation that he could not refuse. Julian took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers as he rose to his feet, the evidence of his arousal apparent against the fabric of his swim trunks. Together, they stepped into the cool embrace of the pool, the water a welcome respite from the heat that had enveloped them both. They waded into the deeper end, the water rising to meet them, its surface rippling outwards in ever-widening circles. Beneath the water, their bodies came together once more, the buoyancy of the pool allowing for a freedom of movement that stoked the flames of their desire to new heights. Julian's hands found Elise's waist, pulling her close as they floated side by side, their lips meeting in a series of kisses that grew in intensity with each passing moment. Elise wrapped her legs around Julian's waist, the water lapping at their entwined bodies as they gave themselves over to the sensation of being together in this moment, free from the constraints of the outside world. Julian's hands roamed over her curves, each touch a testament to the passion that burned within him. The sun, having begun its slow descent toward the horizon, cast long shadows across the surface of the water, a visual echo of the emotional journey that Elise and Julian had embarked upon. Their kisses grew deeper, more fervent, as they explored the depths of their connection, the pool a sanctuary where they could explore the boundaries of their desire without fear or reservation. Eventually, the need for air forced them to break apart, their bodies still intertwined as they floated on the water's surface, their chests heaving with the exertion of their passionate exchange. Elise rested her forehead against Julian's, her eyes locked onto his, the silent communication between them as powerful as any words could express. With their bodies still dripping from their sensual exploration in the pool, Elise led Julian back into the house, the heat of their desire a stark contrast to the cool interior. The world outside seemed to fade into insignificance as they ascended the stairs, their hands clasped tightly together, each step taking them closer to the sanctuary of Elise's bedroom. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the space in a cool, dim light that seemed to invite the sharing of secrets and the fulfillment of long-held desires. As Julian's eyes adjusted to the dimness, he noticed the object on the bedside table, a sleek, vibrant toy that was unmistakably designed for pleasure. The sight of it, a silent testament to Elise's solo indulgence from the night before, sent a jolt of arousal coursing through him, and he felt a surge of curiosity mingled with a twinge of jealousy that the device had been privy to the intimacies that he himself had longed to share with Elise. Elise followed Julian's gaze to the toy, and a knowing smile played upon her lips as she watched his reaction. "Do you know what that is?" she asked, her voice a sultry whisper that seemed to fill the room. Julian nodded, his eyes never leaving the device. "I've seen something similar before," he admitted, a hint of color creeping up his neck as he acknowledged his familiarity with such intimate objects. "Would you like to see how it works?" Elise inquired, her tone playful yet sincere. The offer was both a challenge and an invitation, a chance for Julian to witness firsthand the art of her own pleasure. Julian's reply was immediate and fervent. "Yes, I would." Elise picked up the toy, her fingers tracing the smooth contours of the device with a practiced ease that spoke of many nights spent in the pursuit of her own satisfaction. She clicked a button, and the toy hummed to life, its vibrations a palpable force that seemed to resonate with the undercurrents of desire that pulsed between them. With a boldness that left Julian both awestruck and aroused, Elise reclined on the bed, her body a canvas of sensuality that beckoned to him. She guided the toy over her body, its vibrations eliciting a series of soft gasps and moans that served as a soundtrack to their intimate exploration. Julian watched, utterly captivated, as Elise demonstrated the various ways in which the toy could bring her pleasure. Her movements were both a lesson and a seduction, a revelation of the ways in which her body responded to the ministrations of the vibrant device. As the toy made its way lower, Elise locked eyes with Julian, her gaze filled with a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. She allowed him to witness the moment, the sight of her lost in ecstasy a powerful aphrodisiac that pushed Julian's own arousal to new heights. The lesson was a revelation, a sharing of intimate knowledge that deepened the bond between them. Julian's understanding of Elise's desires, her triggers, and the ways in which she found release was a gift that she had given to him willingly, a trust that he knew was not to be taken lightly. When the waves of her pleasure finally subsided, Elise turned off the toy and set it aside, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts as she recovered from the intensity of her orgasm. Julian moved to join her on the bed, his body drawn to hers with an urgency that could no longer be denied. Their lips met in a kiss that was both a homecoming and a discovery, a melding of mouths and souls that left them both breathless. Julian's hands roamed over Elise's body, tracing the contours of her curves with a reverence that bordered on worship. Every moan, every sigh that escaped Elise's lips served as a guide, leading Julian deeper into the labyrinth of her desires. In response to his touch, Elise's hands explored the planes of Julian's body, her fingers deftly unwrapping the layers of fabric that separated them. Julian's swim trunks were discarded with an urgency that spoke volumes of their mutual need, and for a moment they both marveled at the sight of their bodies entwined on the bed. The heat of their desire was a palpable force in the room, a living entity that seemed to pulse in time with their racing hearts. Julian positioned himself above Elise, his gaze locked with hers as he prepared to claim her as his own. The sensation of their bodies joining, sending waves of pleasure coursing through them both. They moved together in a dance as old as time, their bodies finding a rhythm that was both familiar and completely new. Each thrust, each kiss, each whispered word of encouragement and desire brought them closer to the precipice of their passion, a final of sensation that promised to sweep them both away in a maelstrom of ecstasy. As they reached the apex, their bodies tensed, the world outside their shared ecstasy fading into insignificance. With a final, powerful surge, they both tumbled over the edge. Spent and sated, Julian collapsed onto the bed beside Elise, their bodies still connected as they struggled to catch their breath. The room was filled with the scent of their lovemaking, a heady mix of sweat and desire that served as a potent reminder of the passion they had just shared. As the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to the encroaching shadows of twilight, Elise and Julian lay entwined, their bodies slick with the remnants of their shared passion. The room was bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, the fading light casting a warm, golden hue over their spent forms. The silence that enveloped them was not uncomfortable. Rather, it was a silence rich with the unspoken understanding that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Their lovemaking had been a revelation, a physical manifestation of the deep connection that had been simmering beneath the surface since their first encounter. Elise, nestled comfortably in the crook of Julian's arm, traced idle patterns on his chest, her touch a gentle reminder of the intimacy they had just shared. Julian, his fingers lazily twining through her hair, pressed a tender kiss to the top of her head, a wordless affirmation of his feelings for her. "I hope you're not expecting a repeat performance anytime soon," Elise teased, her voice a soft, sultry purr that resonated with the undercurrents of their newfound closeness. "I might need a little time to recover," Julian chuckled, the sound a low rumble in his chest. "I think I can manage to control myself for a few hours," he replied, his tone light yet laced with an undertone of sincerity. But no promises beyond that. Their laughter mingled with the quiet stillness of the room, a testament to the ease with which they could navigate the delicate balance between playfulness and profound connection. As their mirth subsided, a more serious note entered their conversation, the weight of their shared experience lending gravity to their words. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Julian mused, his gaze fixed on the ceiling above, his mind churning with the implications of their actions. Elise propped herself up on one elbow, her green eyes searching his face for signs of regret or uncertainty. "It does," she acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean it has to change us for the worse. We can choose to see this as a new beginning, a chance to explore what we could mean to each other." Julian turned to look at her, his blue eyes reflecting the depth of his emotions. "I want that, Elise. More than anything, I want to see where this journey could take us." Their dialogue, a delicate interplay of teasing banter and profound revelations, wove a tapestry of shared dreams and mutual respect. They spoke of their hopes and fears, their past experiences and future aspirations, each word a testament to the sincerity of their connection. As the conversation wound down, they lay in silence once more, the physicality of their encounter lingering in the air like a tangible presence, the scent of their lovemaking, the warmth of their entwined bodies, the gentle rise and fall of their chests as they breathed in unison, all served as bittersweet reminders of the line they had crossed. Yet despite the complexities that lay ahead, there was a sense of rightness in their embrace, a feeling of having arrived at a destination that had been preordained by the hands of fate. They had embarked upon a journey of discovery, a path fraught with challenges and obstacles, but one that promised a love that was both profound and transformative. As night descended upon the house, cloaking it in its velvety embrace, Elise and Julian knew that the chapter of their story that had begun in the heat of a summer's day was far from over. Their connection, now cemented by the bonds of intimacy, was a beacon that would guide them through the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. In the quiet sanctuary of Elise's bedroom, they found solace in each other's arms, their hearts beating in rhythm with the quiet pulse of the world outside their window. The aftermath of their passion was a symphony of sensation and emotion, a celebration of the beauty that could be found in the meeting of two souls destined to become one.